Welcome to the West East Bicoastal Poets of the Pandemic and Beyond. And our co-hosts are me, Susana H, Lynn McGee, founder of the series, Carolyne Wright, who couldn't be with us today because she's teaching a workshop, and Sandy Yannone. And we have three fabulous readers today, Kathy Nelson, Laura Smyth, and Subhaga Crystal Bacon. We also have a brief open mic, so if you're interested in reading a poem, a page long, please post in the chat and Lynn McGee will collect your names. We ask that everyone in the audience be muted to protect against bombing and also to protect against extraneous noise. And please use the chat to share your comments about the readers, because I love to see that kind of thing. I know when I'm reading, I always look, not while I'm reading, but afterwards at the chat to see what people said. And you will also be able to see the poets' bios and links to buy their books in the chat column. You know this reading is being recorded because we just made a big deal out of that. And if you want some privacy, you can stop your video, but it's nice, it's nice for the readers if they can see faces instead of rectangles with maybe a name or just a photograph. Our next West East is, if you want to mark it in your calendars, is going to be Sunday, January 12th at the same time, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. And we're doing something a little different than we're having readers from the Braving the Body anthology come. And that's the anthology that was edited by Nicole Callahan, Pitch Chenda Bao, and Jennifer Franklin, and published by Harbor Editions. After that, beginning in March, because as you know, we're bi-monthly, we're going to be moving to a new time and day, Saturdays at 3 p.m. East Coast and noon West Coast. Hopefully this will better accommodate international attendees. But I'm getting a little ahead here because I'm already at March. So let's go back to today. And I'm going to introduce Kathy Nelson. Now, mothers, despite the animal theme of the covers, this is a book about mothers and daughters, fundamentally, a relationship that can often be painful to the point where in one poem in her book, The Ledger of Mistakes, Kathy Nelson refers to her now deceased mother as the copperhead living under the porch, which is to me an incredible image of a mother who is demanding, jealous of her child's relationship with her father, and emotionally unavailable. This contrasts with a few poems in her book about Nelson's own family of choice, considerably more normal and happy, thankfully. This is a book which is almost a memoir in verse about regret and love and, of course, mistakes. And Nelson explores guilt and hurt in a relationship with a mother who, when finally slipping into cognitive dysfunction in her later years, to the point where she does not recognize her daughter, becomes someone she can love without fear or barriers as she visits her in a care facility. The moments of unexpected sweetness in these poems are uncentering because her mother is potentially manipulative and thus her motives can't be trusted. But despite all this, both share a love for nature and in particular gardens. So sometimes formal, sometimes not. These poems speak to a difficult experience with grace and with expertise. So here is Kathy Nelson.
Thank you, Susana. I'm so honored to be reading today with Laura and Subhaga. And thank you to Susana and Lynn and Sandy for creating this event. And Carolyne, I believe, was the fourth name. Events like this are essential to the literary community. And thank you for what you do to offer this. And thanks for everyone who came today as well. I've been a daughter all my life. And for half my life, I've been the mother of daughters. And in the last 14 years or so, the grandmother of an increasing number of granddaughters. So I have a great deal of authority, I believe, to claim that the mother-daughter relationship is the most complex of all human relationships. Daughters crave closeness with their mothers, but they also crave independence from their mothers. So it's a very complicated relationship. And The Ledger of Mistakes is a book about a particular mother-daughter relationship set against a particular background of grief and loss. So I'm going to open with a poem that starts with a photograph from my childhood. Easter, 1956. The magnolia blossoms in the wallpaper behind us, her straw cloche scattered with lilacs. My face shines in the flash, stiff organza, netted rosebud headband. My mother tilts her head toward me, smiling. I slide the photo from its frame again to see her hand reaching, the way my hem drapes across her fingers, not so much restraining as inviting, coaxing me to defer escape from the camera frame. Not quite forbearance, not quite melancholy. Once in a dream, I awoke from numb forgetting, remembered, oh, the longing, a daughter I'd never known, lost in the night. On the horizon, beacons shone, but I stumbled in a canyon of talus slopes and boulders. I never had the dream again, and it's just as well. A person could be destroyed by such hopelessness. I have been my mother, and I have been my daughter. I have driven slowly along a curb, cajoling my girl, honey, please get back in. And I have raced along a corridor, a walker scraping behind me, a plaintive voice calling my name. I've lied, and I've been the one lied to, the advocate and the adversary, the swatter and the fly, the witness and the one afraid to look. I have shrunk from the cliff's edge, and I have marveled at the possibilities of flight. My mother grew up in a world that's almost completely unimaginable now. Whole days when kids would spend the day in the wilderness having adventures with absolutely no adult supervision. In some ways, it was a safer world than the one our kids are growing up in, but in other ways, it was much more dangerous. If you're not familiar with the term log flume, it's something that was used before World War II. It was a V-shaped wooden channel filled with water to transport cut logs. Another buoyancy. A wonder none of us ever drowned. My mother laughing, telling the story again. Gulf Coast summer heat, the treacherous log flume, the rush of brackish water, no lifeguard, no lessons, no ladder. Swimming, they called it, she and her cousins, all boys, though a panicked flail and gasp was what it was. I could never figure her laughter. I can't imagine the ovum that with my father's thrust would become this body already there. A little moon shining in the night like a secret, a tiny pearl packed among her sisters, floating there in my mother's placid waters. My mother was brilliant, charming, beautiful, and the end of her life was tragic in the most ordinary way. Alzheimer's disease is brutal. My mother lost the ability to read a calendar or to find her way out of a store. She lost all but the most rudimentary language. Eventually, she lost even the ability to recognize her own daughter. And a locked unit is a term for an institution or a part of an institution which has locked, alarmed doors for the protection of dementia patients. Our Lady of the Locked Unit. From the Valley of the Shadow, Haldol, Risperidone. My mother wakes, happy as a warbler in pine forest, She's forgotten how to walk, but stands from her wheelchair, teeters like a baby bird perusing air, or like Rodin's old courtesan, or like the cripple at Capernaum. This would be a story about miracles if it weren't so full of sorrow. Hello, beautiful, she sings out to the CNA. To the medtech, I love you. No matter her serrated syllables, he's always cooed, darling, perfect, kissing her cheek, slipping Valium-laced vanilla pudding between her teeth. In the dread-crippled, arthritic, word-terminal, decay-doomed room, the lunch tray clatter slows and a line forms. The beleaguered faithful gather for the Holy Mother's blessing. And I, her famished acolyte, don't I ache too for that beneficence? Good morning, her bony palms unfold the maintenance man's blameless hand. One of the unfortunate things I learned among many of the during my mother's decline is that caregivers of people with dementia often have an elevated risk of developing dementia themselves as a result of the extreme stress of caring for their loved ones. How to unknot a straitjacket. Take the photo of your mother off the wall. Let the blood drain. Don't use a chalice. Make a list of the treasons you've earned. Read them around your neck like skulls. Map the patterns of need in the copperhead scales, remembering her seductive charm. Count the times you ate cake sitting alone in your car, the barbaric crumbs, the sticky plastic fork, the box sagging in the footwell. Reread your instructions to yourself. Do not rescue. Do not suffer. Put at the top of the list of remains the sound of her voice in your throat. I wrote these poems when my husband and I were living in the mountains of Western North Carolina, which is out of the 50 states, the state with the highest number of annual copperhead snake bites. Veterinary offices in the area advertised anti-venom on their marquees. The next street over from our house was called Copperhead Lane. We learned that copperheads are like salmon. They return to their birthplace to give birth. And that place just happened to be under our front porch. This poem is after Jack Gilbert. I never thought my mother would slip back in after she died. How astonishing that she's arrived as a copperhead living under the porch. I stand on the edge and scan the yard. Mostly, I do not see her, but in August, nearing birthing, she eases onto the asphalt to let the sun soothe the cold from her scales. She coils about the drain spout or stretches along the driveway's grass fringe. I know she is my mother because her slow unspooling beguiles me. I know her because I can't take my eyes off her. I watch with that same stitch at my sternum. If I clear my mind of fear, might we reconcile? I suppress my need for her embrace. I imagine I am not the one who needs escaping. At any moment, her languid, looping patterns could break into lightning. My husband unlocks the gun safe, warms up on a paper target. She cares nothing about death. She will return one life to the next until I no longer need her. In the early stages of my mother's dementia, I would drive across the Appalachian Mountains every week. It was only a 2-hour drive to visit her. And after the slow torture of her decline into Alzheimer's disease, after her death 8 years ago, I sometimes, even now, imagine visiting her again as she had been. Lunaria is also called moon plant, and it grows in the South. It may grow elsewhere in the country, I'm not sure. It produces translucent seed pods about that size in the shape of the full moon, hence the name. It's also sometimes called money plant because the seed pods look like coins. Lunaria. To make that trip again across the Appalachians, to set off at dawn, early spring, make my way among the mountains' stooped shoulders. First blush in the crowns of redbuds, icicles dripping from road-cut schist. When I arrive, she's in the garden, as she was. No diagnosis, no documents of surrender. Only the smell of spring mud from the pond. Tender buds of cattails, yellow forsythia. She knows me, not the wrench come to dismantle her life, but her child. Her hands are full of the waste of winter, cut stalks, yarrow, thistle at her feet. Then between the leather of her thumb and forefinger, she rubs the seed pods of moon plant, teaches me to strip the dry husks, let the lucent discs shine like silver. And I'll end with a short new poem, which covers, as you'll hear, some familiar territory. I can't stop writing about my mother. Sonnet with mirror and mother. Why is it the rule and not the exception? A woman looks more like her dead mother the older she gets. The photo from 10 years ago confuses her now. Is she the gray-haired crone or the dark-haired imposter? From the mirror, her mother's turned down mouth, her sagging cheeks look back. The hospice chaplain said, "You are not your mother. You are what she created out of her highest aspiration." So often it seemed her aspiration was to have a different daughter, one who didn't breathe so loudly, one who took up less space. All the daughter ever wanted was to be the goddess, her mother, and now she is. Thank you.
If you guys want to unmute yourself.
That was just amazing. That was just amazing. I'm going to turn it over to Lynn now, just with an apology to Laura Smyth for having mispronounced your last name. So, Lynn.
Okay. Kathy, that was amazing.
It was beautiful. That was
just
absolutely
gorgeous.
beautiful.
Just okay. So this is a great evening. Laura Smyth is a writer, teacher, and a book designer who lives in the Keweenaw Peninsula of
Keweenaw.
Keweenaw. Okay. I met Laura at Columbia when we were in the same MFA program, and even then she had an intellectual alertness that infused her poems with truth. Laura Smyth is the author of the brand new poetry collection, Fox Dreams, from St. Julian Press, as well as the beautiful collection, Wandering in My Mind, from Finishing Line Press. She holds an MFA from Columbia and spent many years living and working in the New York metropolitan area before she moved to Michigan, where she is a founding member, here it comes again, founding member of the Keweenaw Writers Workshop. Her poetry, which has been published in many print and online journals, as well as anthologies, is inspired most by the intersection of human nature and the natural world. It was my honor. I mean, just full disclosure, I did blurb Laura Smyth's new collections, Fox Dreams, and reading it was a real joy. I felt my vision sharpen page by page as I was reading it. There's just something so focused and sharp about her work that I have always admired. As the speaker in Imagine Darkness says, a blue jay insists I witness all the bits and pieces of this life. And I feel like as we're going through the poems, you do witness many unexpected bits and pieces of this life that you will recognize and you will also not recognize. Fox Dreams reveals the partner of beauty is insight, as in Edie becomes the fatuous. Father always said senility is the mind's way of counting backwards until it falls asleep. And the poems flow into each other, epiphanies rising just, in a pace that is very pleasurable to take in. I think there's a lot of intuitional lyricism in this book, and there's something very liberating about it. So without further ado, please welcome Laura Smyth.
Thank you. Golly. Oh, just to give you a sense of where I am, here's a picture of an island in Lake Superior. I got to spend a week on this island this summer as a visiting artist, as a resident artist. It's a new artist residency thing. So we're up here in the very, very, very northernmost tip of Michigan, where if you look at the map and you see the Upper Peninsula, which candidly I didn't know existed and for a long time. But there's the big part of the Upper Peninsula, and then there's this little finger that sticks up into Lake Superior. We're about halfway, 2/3 of the way up that finger. So we're like in the middle of Lake Superior. That's where I am. So people mock me sometimes for going from New Jersey and New York metropolitan area to the most densely populated, to like one of the most least populated parts of the country, but it works. So I think what I'll do is start with the poem that Lynn mentioned, Imagine Darkness. It's kind of long. It's in bits. Okay, so I'll just pause between it because I tend to write in clumps. That link together. This one I started during the pandemic, and in some ways still feel like we're living through. Certainly well, it's been a week, and the residual trauma of the pandemic that we as Americans have been loath to stop and reckon with. But at any rate, so you just I'm just going to read it, and I'll pause briefly between each little section so that you'll recognize that it's the next section. Hopefully it will make sense orally. I think it does on the page, but orally, who knows? Imagined darkness. Fog to droplets to raging floods. Inverted burning hives of desert antlions. A blast of solar heat melts the pavement as a swift, thin storm ties itself like a scarf around the tree's bare shoulders. Lightning hotter than the sun. These flashes burn out doubt. A blue jay insists I witness all the bits and pieces of this life. Today could be the last. A hummingbird circles past my head, or a chipmunk scatters seeds across my porch that sparrows later find. My many-clawed neighbors love me without a name and always return with hunger and appreciation. If I am still enough, they will gently touch me. That's how I know I'm safe. because they do not fear me. Vindictive against the small, vindictive and distant claw of night against the stars, one that won't be stilled, one that burns down all your wishes. You know you're wrong about most things. Stories meant to be heroic are false leads. Tragedy is tiny and unseen until it isn't. The moon walks in and tells you the story of your life from a distant speck neither of you can see clearly, but she's accustomed to reflecting. My girl, she always says no to that imperfect sham. No shadow of platonic forms for her, a feather duster shaking up the room. My girl, she can always sense how close disappointment clings, a perfume that enters the room before you, powder so fine you can't help breathe it in. Don't come back with trouble. Allow the filtered sunlight to keep traveling through. Nothing can stop it, you know, so stop trying. Your soul is a filament vibrating inside a bulb containing heat but not light, fracturing, crumbling, igniting sometimes. The sacred, eternal, domestic separates the bone from the flesh and finds a use for both. Saves you from being either just the bones or just the flesh. Propels you into a rhythm. Even hunger sometimes follows, craving, cunning, bowing. The sacred, eternal, domestic grinds a seed to dust so it may live again as bread. I have cried, scoured, and cursed so thoroughly, you believe the silent cleanliness around you is safe and provided for you. Don't filter too much dust through your lungs. Steady in and out, thickness of air and stock swimming in love. The eternal sacred domestic has no reclamation in mind. A wasted infant is food for someone. And no, the weeping never ceases. It is the eternal sacred domestic. Did I not tell you to put your coat on, to button up, to scrape your own plate clean? I want to be generous, but I have a house to keep. You should kick the mud off your boots before you enter. Maybe you should crawl for a time, because fury is also resident. Wouldn't you rather just sing? There are as many birds as suns if the sky were endless, which it is. So you can be a bird and the sun after all. An empty, massive truck goes rattling down the street, but the feathers swirling around me are unfazed and go on singing, nesting, squabbling, perching. Be a sun that is also a bird. Have the brightest feathers you feel comfortable in, but your song should rumble down any street you live on, piercing notes above the diesel engines and crow calls. Crow, my friend at a distance, flies with a twig from my backyard to the neighbor's pine tree, drinking my bitter coffee that has gone cold. I sit watching, now in sunlight, now shadow. With each cloud, we have a different life. The bones in my body have told me all about growth and steadfast love. As I grow old and lose patience with the world, they hollow out like all the shallow places rabbits nest each summer. I am young again as I sink in, nests of rabbits in my bones. Yeah. I found myself thinking tonight before this reading, so I thought I wish I specialized in light verse, but I don't.
It's okay.
It's okay. It's okay. It's all right.
We can handle it. We can handle
We
you.
can handle it. I know we have to, so we do. Right. Okay. So one of the things about living this far north, at least still, is that there's a lot of snow, right? And God, I haven't got my snow tires on yet, but it's been a warm November. Anyway, so I wrote this poem shortly after moving up here and experiencing my first winter, but anyway, it's called Winter Driving. 4 white-tailed deer bolt as the low flame of sunset ignites the orchard. Directly, we fall silent, lacking conjunctions, broken-hearted, hooves and a dusting of snow, muffled pounding. It always comes back to that black hole in the center, neither matter nor half moon, flames of ice pierced by headlights. Without fear of gravity, momentum will get you over the next rise or into the soft, dark shoulder. Even small failures are unforgiven. The one thing you may never do is stop. Deer leap in 4 directions over drifts that go black outside the range of our beams. Broken-hearted or not, a doe stands in the pelting storm, just taking it. And another poem that was inspired by moving here. This is as you can probably guess, a very, well, it's very rural and it's very white. And I never thought I would live in the Midwest anywhere. And we are a biracial family. My daughter's now a grown adult, thank God. But it's been an interesting experience in a lot of ways, and I will not waste our time on that. But this poem came out of some of the early experiences of having made the decision to move here and start a different kind of life. Home suddenly. Standing between houses, half home, partially lit by stars and snow's rebounding light. My daughter peers from the window as snow drifts against the cedar hedge sheltering the rabbits. Standing between lives, snow spreads before me like a crumpled page. Never such a blank sheet to fill. A rabbit plays dead in the snow, cunning, faux frozen, then gone, and I'm left staring at all the gaps I have created, risks not thought about in years, my daughter's face backlit in the kitchen window. And you gotta check me on time. I think I'm okay.
I haven't been
I
paying
didn't.
attention.
Oh, okay. Okay. I think I'm okay. I thought I had it timed out pretty well.
Okay.
And this is another poem based up here. Because as sardonic as I feel tonight, I do love it up here. I've made many dear friends, and it's a beautiful place. I told my daughter she now has the upper hand on a lot of her contemporaries because she has experienced and understands living with the very rich on the East Coast and the very poor in a rural area. And she can navigate both worlds and she understands both worlds. And there's a need for that kind of navigation and understanding between various worlds. Is one of the things that I think we're seeing coming out of this horrific moment in our country. But so one of my most favorite places is a town at the very top of that finger that I was telling you about called Copper Harbor. And I have a dear friend up there who sometimes lets me come up there for like a week just by myself and stay in a house that she owns and just like hang out. And I'm like, oh God, So this comes from that. Crows in Copper Harbor. Pouncing like feathered cats across the grass, these crows are fussy and determined scavengers. Their scolding voices clear the yard of any smaller birds and also me. Back inside, I fight the urge to flee. My window frames the willow's red-tinged leaves. I'm not sure I want to know what these birds teach. Inside my wooden walls, I watch the trees. And I want to read maybe one more, where is it here? Of something more recent. Oh, yeah, I wanted to be sure to read these last two poems. I think I'll read. That's one. The first one is called "I Will Never See the Rio Grande," and I was sitting in my little backyard here up in my little village of less than 200 people, and thinking about the news of all the horrors of what was going on with the migrant situation and stuff, and listening to just children in the street over playing and stuff, and just thinking about all of that. And so this is what came from that. I will never see the Rio Grande. From the morning, I salvaged the shadow of a hummingbird, and later the evening light, running off from the west facing cherry tree, hurrying the chipmunks to gather more. Never enough. Children are playing under the trees, their voices as vibrant as the crows. I am relieved to hear them, not drowning in a river in Texas. But then I remember where I am and how to listen to children playing in order to salvage something lovely from the day. I do not live near a river of fearful people, not now. Perhaps my day in the river is coming. Tonight, robins are singing back and forth about the fading summer. No, that's not my song. I have not even 1 acre, but in this space I salvage everything in the world which comes to me. It is not enough. It is so small. The weight of it pins me to my chair. And then I think I will end on my happier poem about why I love this little rickety old miner's house up here in no man's land. And it's just called In Praise of Porches. It is not for me to decide every little whim of the sky. Exhaustion brings the rain, I know that much. I used to think the wind had one voice, like Chopin shouting, "The world hurts, pay attention," or perhaps Bach proclaiming, "The world is beautiful, listen." But it's not for me to decide what notes the newly fledged sparrow shares with the sun. She feasts while I fade away. I pace between 2 heavens, both shabby and covered in greens. One faces east, the other west, and because they have been long loved, they stoop a little, but the sun is just as strong. Daylilies by the birch trees open with the colors of sunrise, and listen with me to the sparrows. Thank you.
Thank you so, so much. That was just so moving and just absolutely fascinating. I just am a big fan.
Thank you for inviting me. You know how frequently I do readings.
No, it was just really, this was really wonderful, very powerful. And so
Thank
many moments that just really, now you guys get what I was saying about, like, you realize, oh, that is so true. And I just never really articulated that thought. And yet I've had that experience, but now I have some language to kind of, take me through it in a different way. I love that about the work. Yeah. So,
I will jump in now and just say thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Laura. I'm starting to think of each reader as an interlude into the other readers, and how, and where the connections will come. And so I'm just so grateful for the both of you with just such stunning interludes as I prepare to introduce a collection and a poet that I am so incredibly grateful to be able to introduce tonight, and that is Subhaga Crystal Bacon. I'm slightly embarrassed, though, that I did not pay enough attention while we lived in Washington State. not necessarily that close. I was in Olympia, and Subhaga lives in not in the I-5 corridor. I'm not gonna, reveal things like that, but I believe we were in various online writing groups and Facebook friends, but we know how that can or doesn't go. And it wasn't until my absolute surprise and extreme gratitude that I was in an online reading and heard Subhaga read from Transitory from Boa Editions, which is an Isabella Gardner Award recipient. That's no small order, friends. This month actually marks the 1-year anniversary of Transitory, a chronicle unlike any book-length elegy and call for us to speak their names that I've ever read. The book is about, it is an elegy to those lost to a year, within a year, 2020. We know what the year signifies in our history here, but it was also a year of unspeakable violence against transgender and gender nonconforming people. And you will be hearing about the lives of those people lost. I was moved beyond moved by hearing those stories as I sat in that room, and I did cry. Stories of humans killed for living inside the love of being alive in their truths, their foibles, and the quotidian details that fill in the details one would never want to have to name. The poems are written with such humanity, empathy, solidarity, humility, anger, and grace. They deserve to inhabit these prismatic words as much as the lives of these amazing humans deserved the justice of living their lives out without their murderous conclusions. Thankfully, as we approach Trans Remembrance Day on November 20th, we are once again reminded of both hate's destruction and beauty's life force. Joy and grief are always holding hands, as I used to tell my students. We always need to remember, and Subhaga Crystal Bacon has given us this book to assure we never forget. With profound gratitude, I introduce to you Subhaga Crystal Bacon and Transitory. Thank you so much.
Wow, what a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much, Sandy. I'm so glad we're having a chance to connect tonight here. Yeah, I live in North Central Washington on the east slope of the North Cascades Mountain. I too live in a tiny little town in a valley, a little river of blue in a largely red area of state of Washington, and lived here permanently since 2014. It's very rural, very white, although we have a large Mexican population here as well. But yeah, so there's been a lot of, interesting connections and overlaps. And Kathy, I also went to Warren Wilson, so we have that in common as well.
We should talk sometime.
Pardon?
We should talk sometime.
We should talk sometime. Yeah, I'm really curious to come and visit where you live. I always like to warn people, this is a pretty difficult and challenging book. These are poems that chronicle sexual violence and other types of violence, often resulting in murder. And so, take care of yourself. If you need to turn off your camera or mute me, that's fine, of course. Do what you need to do to take care of yourself. When I first wrote this collection, it was a collection of elegies for the people who'd lost their lives to violence, trans people. And then when I was massaging this into a manuscript, my very dear friend and poetry guide extraordinaire, Jennifer Martelli, whose work you should read if you haven't read it, asked me, where are you in this book? And I was really only in one of the poems. And so I'm going to read the opening poem, sort of situates me and why this book at the time that I wrote it. Cautiously watching for violence, August 2020, the month of no murders of trans people. His voice at the end of the line, middle of the night, bored and languorous, described what he would do to me, knowing where I lived. I'm going to come where you live and rape you and kill you, as if he was following a script. The telephone, 1981, a plastic-shelled landline waking me. The bed against the wall, between windows overlooking the street in my hometown, the town where I lived the first 20 years of my life, so known, me to it and it to me. I was tired of the threats, men calling to tell me these things, men speaking about me in loud voices from the bar while I bought a 6-pack of beer, saying who I was and what. Men intentionally banging into me, their bodies like bars surrounding me, hands in my hair, breath in my face. Years and years by telephone, on streets, when I was lean and rangy in torn jeans and sheer shirts, biker boots, even once by an old Russian woman in Brooklyn, and later by a car full of men following. Even then, I shouted them down, shouted them off, walking in the daylight somewhere in New York City, always the angry mouth that talked back. A psychic once said that I had the unique aura of those who in their lifetimes migrate from male to female. I knew this was true, having known myself a boy and then riding that knowing into puberty, confused in skirts and fishnets and desert boots, crushes on girls with cheekbones like knives, who pushed into my lavatory stall, who let me wear her leather jacket, who was pregnant and married at 17, whose hair I stroked by flashlight, who embarrassed my dreams with longing. The pressure for dance dates, the gay boy smelling of beer, the boy who never called, the one who was refused, the son of a butcher, the cousin of my friend, the friend of my brother. I lost my virginity when I was 19 in college to a man 12 years my senior I thought I'd marry, who wore women's perfume, did manual labor, owned a dress shop with his mother, and dumped me for a younger woman pregnant with his child. Years and years, women and men, the flush of yin and yang in me, big hair, red lips, short skirts, colored tights and shoes and boots and leather jackets in many colors. The wide-legged stride said, "Don't fuck with me," an irresistible invitation to do just that. Even at 60, walking my foofy dog across the street in the suburbs, spring day, from the car window, he says, "Get out of the way, you ugly old dyke." Dyke, cunt, bitch, even once, faggot. Listen, there's a way that I'm as queer and trans as you can be, despite my femininity, hair to my waist, eyeliner, and inside, the man I've always known myself to be. It's a kind of drag, the girl over the boy within the girl. Tight jeans, big belt, even under my elderly paunch, still that fire that says, "Let me scorch you, scorch me with desire." I have a whole new manuscript coming out that I can't say from where just yet, but it's coming out in January of 2026, called A Brief History of My Sex Life, that sort of unpacks, the way family and culture and early childhood sexual abuse can shape our sex and sexual and gender expression. So more news about that coming. I just got the word a couple of days ago. So this was the first poem for one of the trans women who lost their lives to murder, in which I also wrote about myself. It's one of my favorite poems because, I don't know, somehow this woman's life just really got under my skin. Shockey Peters, 32, Amite City, Louisiana, July 1st. She was full of laughter and an abundance of life. Shockey, there's a plant that grows here where I live called shadbush. It's also known as serviceberry, but it's the genus I thought of yesterday, seeking shade on the hillside, carrying you with me in the heat of day. How it gives shade, gives fruit, dark purple, seeded and nourishing. Your face, Shaki, in the one photo I can find, is round and open, dark and sweet. Your eyes seem to tip up a bit at the outer corners. Your lips are full, plush as pillows. I keep waiting for some story to explain your murder. I don't know how much that matters in the long run, but it might fill the gap around your death. I keep thinking about the name Amite City, from the French for friendship. Like my hometown, Philadelphia, city of brotherly love. Likewise, no friend to trans women. I spent a month in Louisiana in 1984. It was hot and humid, and I loved the way sweat soaked me, sticking clothes to skin. I used to move from shade to shade, the shadows of buildings, banana trees, and one very large fig tree in the yard of the house I rented, pan-shaped leaves the size of fans. In 1984, Shaki, you weren't even born yet. It was a heyday for being queer, if you don't count AIDS. We were all trying on gender, like a wig or a dress or suit and tie. I used to go to a drag bar in Philly where I had a crush on a Zoftig redhead I now know to have been trans. She was very kind to me, taking my face in her soft hands, fragrant and styled like the mother of a childhood friend I had to share a bed with one weekend. I clung all night to the far edge in fear that I would accidentally touch her. There was a ripeness in her, sweet, nourishing, a kind of femme that makes my heart ache, that I've never known or been. There are many kinds of shade. There are many kinds of shadow, Shaki, many kinds of shade. I think of you now, inhabiting that, luscious, lush, safe. Funny how we remember these people from our childhood.
Yeah.
Lorna's mom, I won't say her last name, although I do remember it from Girl Scouts. I had such a crush on her. A lot of the poems in the book are in forms, and I'm not reading a lot of those tonight, but I'm reading this one, which is a sestina. So you'll hear that repetition. Marilyn Cazares, 22, Brawley, California, July 16th. She was strong, and she would look anybody in the eye and say, I'm very proud of who I am. Marilyn, it's hard to keep up with the pace of hate this year. This summer, it seems to flower like a noxious weed, sending spores to couch themselves into what should be the beauty of your freedom to be yourself, brave, your proud Aunt Larissa's proud niece. It's rare for a family to use the word niece for those who are transgender, as if they hate recognizing their changed, their brave children. Is it so hard to let them flower, to allow them to find their own beauty? All that imposed invisibility is couched in misgendering and dead naming. Your couch was set ablaze, Marilyn, Aunt Larissa's niece, by someone who had to kill your beauty to cover his own self-hate. Did he see in you the seed and flower of a life he did not feel the bravery to love? To love what is, we must brave life or risk watching it go by from the couch, separated by walls and doors from the flowering. We must be willing to witness living. My own niece has also been hurt at the hands of one who hates her self-sufficiency, her fierce beauty. Our family nickname for her is Beauty Heart. It's a way of saying, let my love make you brave, protect you from the world's random acts of hate. Marilyn, I'm telling you this only as a way to couch the heartache of your aunt proclaiming you as niece. She told the world about your painful flowering from a boyhood of taunts and hurts. You were a flower amidst the heavy feet of those who fear unfamiliar beauty, one born a boy who grows up to be a niece. That transition is the thing that made you, Marilyn, brave. Your murder and the burning of your body on a couch did not extinguish your beauty with the flames of hate. Your people came to leave flowers for your bravery, Marilyn. Your beauty lives beyond the burnt couch. No one can kill your Aunt Larissa's niece with hate. It's quite terrifying. You know, when I wrote this book, well, when I just did the research a little bit before getting on the call, 22 states and territories and the District of Columbia have hate crimes that include gender identity. But we can expect many of those to be repealed as time goes by, as we go into the unknown that's coming upon us. As Sandy mentioned, on November 20th will be Transgender Day of Remembrance. And unfortunately, that's no protection for trans lives. I'm going to read 2 poems for women who lost their lives on TDOR. Asia Janae Foster, 22, Houston, Texas, November 20th, Transgender Day of Remembrance. She said she was going on a date. I should be used to the lack of news, but for Asia, only one article about her death, even 10 days out. The 39th murder of a transgender person this year, the 23rd Black, the 3rd in Texas, and the 1st in Houston. With this silence about their deaths, it's almost impossible to keep track. 3 days after Asia, the 40th trans murder, 24th Black trans person was killed in Virginia. It's not normal for her to leave not in her own car, so it must have been someone she already knew and had been talking to. Chamisha Sims, 30, Richmond, Virginia, November 20th, Transgender Day of Remembrance again. Feel her fear, running at night from a man with a gun, running onto a stranger's porch and calling out a random name, hoping someone would come. But no, the video shows that he caught her and robbed her. Then there's a gap. She was found 5 miles away, shot once in her mom's rental car. The sole occupant crashed into a garage. Her family says she was driving home. In the video, he's wearing a dark Nike hoodie and a surgical mask over a visible goatee. They've got him described down to cut-up stonewashed jeans and brown Timberland boots, but they do not have him in the flesh. Her father said she was well-loved, always caring for others. We're never going to stop looking. We're never going to stop looking. They did find him, though, and he is serving time for that crime. So just 2 more, and thank you so much for listening to these really difficult poems to hear. Jaheim Bella Pugh, 19, Pritchard, Alabama, December 18th. He said, "I just want to be me, Mama. I just want to be me," is what he said, and I support him. It seems to come down to the rainbow jumpsuit she, dressed as a woman, Jaheim was Bella, was she, wore to a Christmas party, that and the wig. Bystanders videotaping her while she lay dead or dying in the street said, he would still be alive if he wasn't wearing that dress. Not even a dress, just a woman's colorful one-piece pantsuit. And I always end with this one because it brings at least a little bit of light into the reading. I have room for you and me, a litany. For the handsome trans woman and cisgender wife, for the suit and tie and heels, for the skirt and corset and beard, I have room. No one can say a life is not right. I have room for you and me. For the one whose father loved her like a son until she became one, I have room for you and me. For those who claim their own names, break free from the limited born as cocoon. For the one with the wide-hipped sachet, big hands smoothing her dress, I have room for you and me. For him whose voice rings high, whose chest bears scars under hair and ink, I have room. For the one who wears their self-made clothes and hand-painted shoes, not trying to pass, I have room for you and me. For the pregnant man and woman father, I have room for you and me. For the sex worker's food and rent, for the elderly boy's sparse whiskers and soft eyes, for the statuesque matron, the broad-beamed man, for your lives and your loves and your rights, I have room. I have room for you in me. Thank you. I know that was hard. Thank you for listening with me.
That was amazing. Absolutely amazing. You guys, you want to unmute yourselves while we go into the open mic? Let's take a moment and just finish absorbing these poems. So moving, and just the description of the guy, for example, the boots, the ordinary things, the hoodie, is just terrifying and so simple. I love that quality, in your work.
Thank you.
And the craft is exquisite, to be able to use poems, like the Sistina. I mean, the container of that Sistina it is like so unbelievable to just say, I'm going to use repetition here. Like nobody's ever used it. It's just, yeah, they're astounding. And also like, I really felt like Shockey's poem is really an epistolary poem as well. It's almost like a letter. So to use these different forms to give shape to these lives that were so unique, each life is, but to do that with form. And I don't feel them as hard. I mean, I feel them hard. I feel them, I take them in, but I feel they're so necessary. It's like, I need to be here. I need to listen. I need to bear witness to how you bore witness and wrote them down. That's my obligation also as a poet.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Was there anyone who wanted to read in the open mic? I didn't get any messages, but I might have missed.
I noticed Kate posted. I don't know if anybody else wanted to.
Kate, you might be the only one, Kate. So would you like to read a poem for the open mic?
Yes, I would.
Thank you. Okay, here, I'll pin you.
My poem comes in simplicity from the depth of the readers tonight that shared so much of their lives. My heart is beating so fast. I will take this piece of paper and I will read because I've been allowed to. Everywhere we rise, we lift the veil, century by century, no longer blind to bias, the root of suppression. We rise to reject the cruelty of people for property, indentured to poverty. We are done with the reign of tyrants raging in armies or in communities with vulgarity. We now, as seekers for humanity, outpace the tormentors of caustic infliction. We support sovereignty of matriarchal equality where power mongrels separate and divide with lies. We march for justice, for freedom for all. We are not shells to be tossed to the sea. Our worthiness reacquaints our likeness. We turn the tide. We are the Art of Skin Color 2000 in the Pantone Library. We are indebted to acknowledge 4,000 by Yannone Research, Angelica Das. Angelica Das. We no longer pen in pseudonym. We thrive with education, giving us voice without retribution. We broadcast through ley lines worldwide. We build bridges, continent to continent, for all people. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
And, thank you also for acknowledging the undercurrent I think that we're all feeling tonight. And just thank you for that. So, Sandy, do you want to close us out?
I will, with deep gratitude, be happy to close us out.
Can I say something
Kate,
real quick? Sorry,
of
I'm just going to
course.
post our website link in the, if you want to check that out, we'll have a recording of this reading in about 5 or 6 days. So just keep that for that. Okay. Thanks to Susana, who will put it on YouTube, and then she sends me the link, and then I put it on the website. Sorry.
Well, I just want to say with the deepest of gratitude to Kate, that was really a perfect way to bring this reading to its conclusion, because it tapped into the veins, I think, of each of the readers so well. It really tapped into the heart of Kathy Nelson, Laura Smyth, and Subhaga Crystal Bacon. Thank you to the three of you, for bringing humanity to these squares tonight, to the table, so to speak. And this is what we do here at West East Bi-Coastal Poets of the Pandemic and Beyond. We began during the pandemic. I wasn't with this illustrious crowd at that point. But I'm so happy to have been on the journey. And the journey is exactly what we witnessed tonight and what we carry forward. I was listening to something today that someone today talking about, we're not really out of the pandemic, really. We're still in its deep, deep shadows, very deep shadows. And so what is the beyond? Well, what's beyond what happens is what we can write down what happens. That's where beyond helps us. That's what beyond helps us do, to process, to witness, to find ways to be human together, and to be human on a planet that we do not care for as well as we should. We also inhabit the planet with other life forces. I know it sounds very elevated for me to be saying all this about a modest little reading, but that's what I see happen in every reading I go to online or in person. So it is not a modest thing. It is in fact going to become one of the most powerful things we can continue to do in the time that we now will be moving through. So I say, I hope you will join us back here on January 12th for our next edition, where we will be featuring the poetry from another very groundbreaking collection, Braving the Body. What we continue to bring will matter. The more that we can be deeply listening, find our ways to be in solidarity with where we meet and where we have differences, is really the only way through these next years. Because it will show that we are not part of what is a very, very serious problem in this country. And it has trickled into the world, as we know, and the world had watched us and watched what we did in the name of, well, we didn't. I don't think anyone in this room did it, but watched what the United States, what the voters voted in, and the people of the world were watching, and they were hoping for a very different outcome. So many people told me that, in my other international setting. So I hope you will join us back on January 12th to continue that conversation in a different, within a different prism. And again, I very much thank you for being here tonight for such a powerful reading. And for those of you who are watching us now on a recording, this is your invitation to come into the room with us as well on January 10th. All are welcome, and we must move forward by listening and being in conversation. And these are the rooms I want to inhabit, and with the people I want to be with as we move forward. So I thank everyone. I hope you take very good care of yourselves in these ensuing couple months. I hope the holidays are able to bring you some respite of joy and communion with people. And as I always say on Cultivating Voices live poetry, keep writing, keep speaking out, find the ways for that to be safe for you. But, we must keep our voices going. They are our way forward. So thanks again to Kathy, Laura, Subhaga, and also to my co-hosts tonight, Lynn McGee, Susana H, and Carolyne Wright in absentia. Carolyne will be back with us in January, as I hope all of you will. And a very good night to you all.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.